Every culture has a version of the ultimate predator. The animal that represents pure, uncompromising aggression. The thing that doesn't flinch, doesn't retreat, doesn't calculate risk. It just attacks. For the last 30 years, that animal has been the T-Rex, the apex of 150 million years of evolution, the largest land predator that ever lived, the creature so dominant that nothing on its continent dared challenge it. Except that's not what the fossil record actually shows. What it shows is an animal that, by the behavioral standards we apply to every other predator on Earth, was remarkably, almost systematically risk-averse. An animal that avoided confrontation when it could, that waited instead of chased, that let other things do the dangerous work and arrived when the outcome was already decided. What it shows, if we're being precise about it, is a coward. The obvious objection is size. If you weigh 9 tons and nothing can kill you, why would you ever need to be cautious? That's the assumption built into every T-Rex depiction, that its dominance was absolute, that risk didn't apply to it, that the apex predator is by definition fearless. But that assumption gets the biology backwards. The real question isn't whether T-Rex could win any fight it entered. The better question is, why would it enter a fight at all? Every predator that has ever lived, from a house cat to a great white shark, operates on the same fundamental principle. Expend the minimum energy for the maximum return. Avoid injury at all costs. Because in the wild, an injury doesn't just hurt, it kills. Slowly, inevitably, but it kills. The question isn't whether T-Rex was powerful. It was. The question is whether power and courage are the same thing. And the evidence says they're not. In 2013, paleontologist Jack Horner, the scientist who served as the primary technical advisor for the Jurassic Park films, published a paper in PLOS One, making an argument that divided the field. His analysis of T-Rex bone structure, sensory anatomy, and feeding evidence led him to a provocative conclusion. T-Rex was primarily a scavenger. Horner's evidence was specific. The arms were too short for active predation. The olfactory bulbs, the brain region responsible for smell, were proportionally enormous, larger relative to body size than in almost any known carnivore. That's the anatomy of an animal that finds food by detecting decay from kilometers away, not by running down prey. The legs, despite being powerful, showed a top speed estimate of roughly 17 kilometers per hour slower than an adult human sprinting. Then there was the tooth wear. T-Rex teeth showed patterns consistent with crushing bone, the behavior of an animal eating something already dead, extracting every calorie from a carcass rather than making a clean kill and moving on. Horner's full scavenger hypothesis remains contested. Most current paleontologists believe T-Rex was an opportunistic predator capable of hunting, but more than willing to scavenge when the opportunity arose. That middle position is actually more damning for the fearless predator image. Not a pure scavenger, just an animal that consistently chose the option that involved less risk. Start with what we know about how large predators actually behave. Lions' apex predators, nothing hunts them are injured or killed by prey in roughly 1 in 4 hunts. A buffalo horn to the wrong place ends a lion's ability to hunt forever. So lions choose carefully. They target the old, the young, the isolated. They abandon hunts the moment the prey becomes dangerous. The fearless predator of the savanna spends most of its life sleeping, waiting, and calculating odds. Now scale that logic up to 9 tons. A T-Rex with a broken leg didn't limp to the watering hole and recover. It starved in place. An eye injury didn't heal in a week. It permanently compromised the most sophisticated visual system in the Cretaceous. Every interaction with live prey was a calculation. Is this worth the risk of injury? For an animal that couldn't be replaced and couldn't afford to be compromised, the math almost always pointed away from confrontation. The fossil evidence supports this. Healed T-Rex bones show injuries consistent with falls and bone stress, the record of a heavy animal moving carefully through difficult terrain, not the bite patterns you'd expect from frequent combat with large prey. Compare that with Triceratops fossils, which regularly show healed injuries from being gored, bitten, and struck. Triceratops fought, constantly. The T-Rex record looks much quieter. But here's what's really interesting. There's a specimen known as Sue, the most complete T-Rex skeleton ever found, now at the Field Museum in Chicago. Sue's bones show evidence of a healed fibula fracture, a damaged shoulder, and fused vertebrae consistent with years of chronic stress. Sue lived to an estimated 28 years. That survival, those healed injuries, That age, none of it is consistent with an animal that took unnecessary risks. Every one of those healed bones is evidence of an animal that was careful enough to still be alive. Caution, in the fossil record, looks exactly like survival. But here's the thing. We've been calling this cowardice. And that word only makes sense if we assume that the purpose of power is to prove itself. That assumption says more about us than it does about the T-Rex. Every culture that has ever told a story about a monster has made the same move. The more powerful the creature, the more recklessly aggressive it must be. Power without restraint, dominance without calculation. The predator that doesn't think, just acts. That's the story we needed the T-Rex to be. The actual animal was something different. It was patient, strategic, willing to wait for the outcome it wanted without paying a price it couldn't afford. In any other context, in business, in war, in chess, we'd call that intelligence. We call it cowardice when it's a dinosaur because we wanted a monster. What we got was something more interesting. An apex predator that understood, on some deep biological level, that the goal was never the fight. The goal was always survival. The T-Rex that shows up in every movie is an animal defined by what it destroys. It charges. It roars. It takes what it wants with no concern for the cost. The T-Rex that actually lived for 2 million years on the same continent, outlasting species after species, was an animal defined by what it preserved. Its own body, its own capacity to keep going, its own life. Fearlessness is easy. It costs nothing right up until the moment it costs everything. Survival is harder. It requires knowing when not to fight. The T-Rex knew.